Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today, in honor of Martin Luther King Day, we're going to be continuing the series, Doubting Truth, Justice, and the American Way, and we're going to be doubting the concept of equality, or at least kind of taking a deep dive into the idea of equality and seeing whether or not it's something that we want. This is going to be based off of my previous video where I did a dramatic reading of Harrison Bergeron. If you are unfamiliar with the story of Harrison Bergeron, I would suggest you take a look because it provides a great intuition of why we might be interested in doubting the idea of equality. Anyway, let's get going. So, there are two big questions we're going to be taking to a couple of these concepts of equality to see if we can really parse out what we mean by equality and what we want out of equality. First, is equality something we actually believe in? Is this conception of equality something we actually think is really out there in the world? And then, is it something that we want to make out there in the world? Is it something we consider good? Let's take a look. So, the first one is the classic line, all men are created equal. Do we believe it? I really don't think so. Or we would have a very strange sense of the word equal if we did believe it. It seems that people have different levels of intelligence, strength, beauty, ability, as in they're able-bodied or disabled, but also people are different heights, people are different weights, people look different. I don't think people are created equal. That doesn't seem to really make sense in the strict understanding of all men are created equal. So no. And do we want it? I would say we definitely don't want it, for the very reasons offered in Harrison Bergeron. When we start forcing people to be equal, those things that make us special or those things that are great about us get lost in the mess. So I don't think all men are created equal is a really strong phrase. Once again, as with all of my own videos, if you have a really better understanding of this phrase or what you think it means, please offer it in the comments below. Explain it to me. I'd love to hear. Now, what if our understanding of equality is that we should treat everyone the same? Well, do we believe we should treat everyone the same? No, I don't think so. We don't force people in wheelchairs to go up the stairs. We don't force people with allergies to eat peanut butter if they're allergic to it. We discriminate in employment based on people's level of experience or their intelligence or their ability to do those tasks that are required for the employment. And in medical care, of course we don't treat everyone the same. We treat people based on what they need. You don't give someone who doesn't have diabetes insulin shots, for example. So I don't think we do believe we should treat everyone the same, at least in the strict sense. Now, do we want it? Once again, we don't want to give everyone insulin shots or have everyone eat the same food. This seems to be forcing conformity on something that's not required. We don't need to treat everyone the same. So, what can we really mean by equality or wanting equality in our society? Let's see. What about everyone has the same chance to succeed? I think we're getting closer to an understanding of this. But do we believe it? I think this is something that, on the levels of things like money or race or gender or privilege, we want it really, really bad. We may not believe it's there yet, but it's something we want or we're working towards. We want people to have the same chance to succeed, regardless of their income, their race, their gender, their amount of privilege. However, there are some other human traits that we might discriminate on based on the job. We might discriminate based on someone's intelligence. We probably wouldn't hire someone with a really low IQ to work at Microsoft. We might discriminate based on strength. We might not take someone who's very, very weak to go work at a construction site. And we might discriminate based on their ability. Someone who's blind probably isn't going to be flying a plane. So, while we think that everyone has the same chance to succeed in terms of certain abilities or certain traits, it seems there's some traits that we think, no, we should discriminate based on those. So, I'd say no. Do we want it? CEOs chosen by lottery? No matter how hard you try, you have the same chance as anyone? I don't think so. I think at least for those specific things of things like intelligence, strength, and ability, we do want to discriminate based on those. But I think we can dig a little bit deeper here and come up with a better definition if we split those things that we do want to discriminate on with those things that we don't want to discriminate on. Let's take a look. So, there's a set of things that we think should be discriminated on. We should be able to say, you have a better job because you have this, you have a worse job because you don't have this. And there's things we think should rest equal, that regardless of that, you should have the same opportunity or the same chance to get a good job. Let's take a look. Things we can discriminate on. Intelligence I'd put as number one. Once again, people with high IQs are probably going to be working at Microsoft or Google, while people with lower IQs might end up working at McDonald's or in a worse job. It's an unfortunate reality, but it seems to be the reality we're in. Your strength. Once again, this is very specific to things like construction working or in the military or something like that, where strength is actually required for the job, but it seems to be something we do in some cases discriminate against, perhaps for policemen or firemen, so on and so forth. Your ability or lack thereof. I'm thinking of this in terms of disabilities, once again. I would say that we're not going to let blind people fly planes, at least until we can come up with the technology to overcome that disability. Your level of experience. This seems to really be something we focus in on, especially looking at resumes and looking at how we're hiring people. And your charisma, your likability. This is what you judge in an interview. Now, what are those things that we want to rest equal? Well, level of income, amount of money you make. That seems to be something we want to stay equal. We want those people from low-income backgrounds to have the same chance as those people from the top 1% of getting a job. Race. Big piece we've been working on for a long time, hence the Martin Luther King Day thing. We want people to have the same opportunity regardless of their race. Gender. Another really big civil rights kind of movement that's going on throughout history. Religion. Something that arguably people came to the United States to avoid religious persecution, and we don't want people to be discriminated on based on their religion for their job. Your appearance. This would be something along the lines of maybe physical deformities, but also just how you look and how you appear. So we don't want to discriminate against someone based on if they have a very strange-looking face, or if they're just really unattractive. We don't want to discriminate based on that. And finally, orientation. This is the most recent kind of civil rights movement. And while some people might argue we should discriminate against it, I think the general trend of at least the United States is moving towards acceptance. So, what can we do to split these up? Because we have a good list of kind of what are our gut senses of these. But these have moved around as recently as the last 50 years, a lot across whether or not we should discriminate on them. So what can we come up with as something that's not an arbitrary distinction between what we are allowed to discriminate on and what we aren't? Because right now, this discrimination is really arbitrary. I apologize, I forgot privilege. Privilege covers a lot of these other things, but it's something we want to kind of remain equal. We have an arbitrary distinction right now, and we need to come up with a rule or a reason that we're allowed to discriminate based on the things that are in red and not discriminate on the things in black. Let's see. So, maybe it's control versus no control. If you have control over it, then we're allowed to discriminate on it. But if you don't have control, then you shouldn't discriminate on it. That kind of makes sense in our head, and it makes sense with things like race and gender, but let's see if it fits with the rest of our pieces. Appearance is something arguably you have control over. Even if you have a physical deformity, you can probably get it surgically changed these days, plastic surgery, all that jazz. Experience, once again, probably something you have control over. But, as I'm going to mention later, these things are going to be somewhat dependent on the amount of money you have, the amount of money you grew up with, so I'd put them kind of in control, but probably in control. Religion, something you have a control over. You have a choice. Even if you're born into religion, you can change religions. Your charisma, your likability, how personable you are. I'd say that's something you have control over. Now, arguably no control, things like race. That should be pretty clear. Strength, and when I'm talking about strength, I'm talking about kind of that base level of strength. That's the strength you start with. Sure, you can get more strength, you can work out, you can become better, but just like money, you could make more money. There's something to be said for the strength, the intelligence, the money that you're born with. That you don't have control over. Your gender, arguably don't have control over. Intelligence, as I said, with strength. It's something of kind of that innate intelligence, that inborn intelligence is something you don't have control over. Sure, you can get an education, but I'd put that under the category of experience more than I would put it under the category of strict intelligence. Privilege, definitely don't have control over. That's dependent on race, gender, and income. Your ability, or lack of disability, is something you don't have control over. Sometimes you do. Sometimes it's based on an accident, but a lot of the times it's something you can be born with. Your orientation, some people might argue this one way or the other. It's not going to be really important to the distinction. I'm not going to put it out there. It seems to me the science puts it under no control, but who knows? And finally, money. Once again, this isn't the amount of money you save or the amount of money you are making. It's the amount of money your parents made or that you were born into. That's something you don't have control over. The problem, of course, is this isn't a really good distinction. As you see, there's things in black on both sides of the columns. There's things in red on both sides of the columns. It seems there's a lot of things that we don't have control over that we are going to discriminate on for things like a job. So what if we were talking then about whether or not it affects your job? That seems like a really strong place to start as far as what we should talk about for what you can discriminate on against. Let's see. Problem is, things like money seem to affect your job. If you have a lot of money, you're more likely to work late because you can get a babysitter. You can make it to work earlier because you can get a taxi. You have better connections with people who might become donors or investors. You are in a world that allows you to do so many more things when you have money. So it seems to affect your job. Your level of experience. Of course, this affects your job. If you have done something for 20 years, you're more likely to be able to do that better than if you haven't done it for a single year. Your appearance. Depending on what you're doing, if you're in customer relations, I would argue that this does affect your job. Things like extreme physical deformities are probably going to put people off. Even if it shouldn't put them off, it may in fact put them off. So I would say your appearance does affect your job. Your charisma, your level of likability, this kind of plays in with appearance. If you're a really good salesman and a really nice person to talk to, that's going to affect your job performance if you're a used car salesman or something. Your privilege, your level of privilege. I think this is really important because there's the kind of understood language of the culture of power that those people with privilege know how to speak. And if you are privileged and you look like someone else who's privileged and that other person who's privileged is thinking about buying something, they might be more likely to buy from you than someone who doesn't look like them or doesn't kind of speak their language. Your level of intelligence. Once again, it seems to be that we hire smart people to go work at Microsoft and we hire not as smart people to work at a gas station. But I might be wrong. Your level of ability. It seems to affect your job. If you are blind, you can't fly a plane, so on and so forth. And your strength. Once again, this is going to be dependent on the job, but I'd say it does affect a number of jobs. Things that do not affect your job. I think someone could argue that race does affect your job. I think it's moving in the direction of affecting your job less and less. Hopefully, but it might affect your job. Religion, unless you're working at an abortion clinic or a church, probably not. Gender, while there have been a lot of studies that say that people of different genders work in different ways, I'd say that it's not going to be the kind of thing that based on your gender you can't do a specific job. And finally, orientation. I think unless you're working at a Chick-fil-A, it's not going to matter. So, once again, we don't seem to have had a really strong distinction. Sure, all the things in red are on the left, but there's some things in black over there too. There's some things that affect your job that we don't want to discriminate against. So this doesn't seem to be a really strong distinction. The problem at the end of the day is, even if we do get a perfect distinction that separates things that we do want to discriminate against versus the things that we don't want to discriminate against, there's a lot of things in that don't category that are going to affect those things in the red category. So your money can affect your ability. Those people with money are more likely to get those treatments or those technologies and procedures to cover disabilities quicker. And those people are more likely to be able to work unpaid internships and get more experience faster than those people who would only be able to work a job that's going to pay them. Your privilege is going to affect your experience. It's going to affect your charisma. It's going to affect a lot of things, as we've mentioned already. And of course, your appearance is in some way going to affect your charisma. There's a lot of things that play in, and these things are also interconnected. I don't really think we'll ever be able to get a strong distinction that separates these two sides. Now, I'll offer an argument. We divide human traits into two groups, one which we may discriminate based on intelligence, strength, etc., the other which we may not, race, gender, etc. We get the idea of we want to discriminate on some things from things like Harrison Bergeron, and so on. Our distinction is arbitrary, and has often changed, as changes recently in the last 50 years. Arbitrary distinctions provide no reason for accepting them over another distinction. So, our distinction provides no reason for allowing us to discriminate based on intelligence and strength, but not on race and gender. Seems a little concerning. Please, if you have something that does allow for this separation, if you have that distinction, please offer it in the comments and criticisms below. I'd be very interested to respond to it. Watch this video and more at Carneades.org. Happy MLK Day, and stay skeptical, everybody.